This wasn't just a free agency shift. This was a warning shot the entire league felt. Angel Reese landed in Atlanta expecting momentum, expecting respect, expecting players to rally around her presence, and instead silence. Not the respectful kind, the kind that echoes, the kind that exposes something nobody wanted to say out loud. Because while Reese was stepping into a new chapter, the rest of the league was running in the opposite direction. And here's where it gets brutal. The moment Chicago moved on from her, the same franchise everyone mocked, the same team labeled undesirable, suddenly became the hottest destination in the WNBA. Skylar Diggins-Smith didn't hesitate. Duana Bonner-level experience. Carrington's defensive fire. Azura Stevens. Rickea Jackson. One by one, they didn't just sign, they rushed in. No hesitation, no doubt, no fear. So now the question isn't subtle anymore. It's loud, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. Why now? Why did Chicago suddenly become attractive the exact second Angel Reese left? And even worse, why isn't Atlanta getting that same energy? Because behind the headlines, behind the highlight reels, behind the double-doubles, and the branding, something doesn't add up. Something deeper is shifting inside locker rooms, inside front offices, inside conversations players don't put on social media. And the scariest part? Angel Reese is starting to feel it. Because this isn't about talent anymore. This is about trust. And what happens next could define her entire career. Before the silence, before the free agency snubs, before Atlanta even entered the picture, Angel Reese was supposed to be the centerpiece. Not just a player, the player. Chicago didn't just draft her. They built around her energy, her presence, her identity. She came in with a national championship aura, a massive fan base, and a personality that refused to blend in. From day one, she wasn't just playing basketball, she was commanding attention. And for a moment it worked. Double-doubles piled up. Rebounding numbers exploded. Headlines followed her everywhere. She became one of the most talked about rookies in the league. A walking storyline. A cultural force that felt bigger than just the court. But underneath that momentum, cracks were forming. Quiet at first. Easy to ignore. Because when production looks good on paper, people don't ask too many questions. But inside the locker room, the tone was shifting. Because while Reese was building her brand, the team wasn't building wins. 13-27. Then worse, 10-34. That's not a slow rebuild. That's a collapse. And collapses don't happen without reasons. Teammates started feeling it. Not publicly. Never publicly at first, but internally. The chemistry wasn't clicking. The system wasn't flowing. And slowly, frustration started replacing excitement. Then came the moments that changed everything. Comments. Not in private. Not behind closed doors. Out loud. Questioning the roster. Calling for better players. Making it clear that what she had around her wasn't enough. And that kind of message, it doesn't land quietly. Because when one player says the team isn't good enough, every other player hears exactly what that means. And it doesn't build trust. It breaks it. Then the tension escalated. Veterans, players who had earned respect over years, started feeling dismissed. Situations that should have been handled internally started leaking into public conversations. And suddenly, it wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about identity, about ego, about who the team really belonged to. And in that environment, things don't stabilize. They spiral. Because once trust is damaged inside a locker room, every mistake feels bigger. Every loss hits harder. Every interaction carries weight it shouldn't have. And Chicago felt it. Game after game. Loss after loss. Energy dropping. Frustration rising. Until the organization had to face a reality they couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't just a performance issue. This was a chemistry problem. A leadership problem. A direction problem. And when those problems stack up, even talent isn't enough to save it. Because basketball isn't just about numbers. It's about fit. It's about connection. It's about players wanting to show up for each other. And somewhere along the way, that connection disappeared. So when people look at the trade, when they look at the free agency shift, when they wonder why players suddenly chose Chicago the moment Reese left, they're missing the deeper story. Because this didn't start with Atlanta. It didn't start with free agents. It didn't even start with the trade. It started long before that, when the foundation inside Chicago began to crack. And by the time anyone realized how deep those cracks were, it was already too late to fix them, which leads to the moment everything finally exploded. The breaking point didn't come quietly. It exploded, because everything that had been building behind closed doors, the tension, the frustration, the quiet resentment, finally surfaced in a way nobody inside Chicago could ignore anymore. And it started with something that should have been small, but wasn't. A comment. Public. Direct. Unfiltered. Angel Reese didn't go to the front office. She didn't pull a coach aside. She didn't address it internally. She went to the media and made it clear the team needed better players, that it was non-negotiable. And just like that, everything changed. Because that wasn't just a statement. That was a message. To management, to the locker room, to every teammate who had been grinding through losses right beside her. And the reaction? Immediate. Cold. Because when players wake up and see their own teammate telling the world they aren't good enough, that doesn't motivate them. It isolates you. Trust doesn't bend in that moment. It breaks. And Chicago didn't just feel it. They documented it. Because what happened next wasn't random. It was calculated. The organization responded with 4 words that sent shockwave, and that's the first shocking twist. Because this wasn't just discipline. This was a signal, a warning that the situation had gone deeper than anyone publicly realized. And then it got worse. Because instead of absorbing the moment, instead of stepping back in line, instead of repairing the damage, the response reportedly escalated. Frustration turned into resistance. Energy turned into separation. And suddenly, it wasn't just tension anymore. It was division. Inside the locker room. Inside practices. Inside the culture. Because now teammates weren't just dealing with losses. They were dealing with discomfort. And that's where things crossed a line you don't come back from. Because once a locker room feels divided, every possession looks different. Every pass feels heavier. Every mistake feels personal. And Chicago, they were living in that reality. But here's where the twist cuts even deeper. Because while all of this chaos was unfolding internally, on paper, Angel Reese still looked like a star. Double-doubles, rebounding leader, all-star selections, numbers that told one story. But inside the building, a completely different one. Because those numbers weren't translating. Not into wins, not into cohesion, not into progress. And that contradiction, that gap between production and impact, became impossible to ignore. Because front offices don't just evaluate stats. They evaluate sustainability. They evaluate chemistry. They evaluate whether a player makes the team better or just looks good individually. And Chicago had their answer. So when the season ended, the decision wasn't emotional. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't even complicated. It was inevitable. Because the organization had already moved on mentally. The suspension wasn't the breaking point. It was the confirmation that the situation couldn't be repaired, that the locker room couldn't reset, that the future couldn't be built around this version of reality. And that's when the real shock hit. Because instead of holding on to a 2-time All-Star, instead of maximizing value, instead of negotiating from strength, Chicago did something that stunned the league. They took the deal. Fast. Quiet. Almost aggressively. Future picks. No star return. No drawn-out negotiations. Just gone. And that tells you everything. Because teams don't move like that unless they're trying to end something immediately. Not improve it. Not reshape it. End it. Which raises the most uncomfortable question of all. What exactly was happening behind those doors that made Chicago walk away this fast? And why did the rest of the league react the way it did the moment she was gone? Because what happened next didn't just answer that question. It exposed everything. What happened after the trade didn't feel normal. It felt surgical. Because the moment Angel Reese was gone, Chicago didn't pause. They didn't rebuild slowly. They didn't test the market. They accelerated. Aggressively. And that's where the second twist hits harder than anything before it. Because players didn't hesitate. They chose Chicago. Skylar Diggins-Smith, 7-time All-Star, proven leader, walked in without blinking. DeWanna Bonner-level presence. Carrington's defensive edge. Azura Stevens bringing spacing and experience. Rickea Jackson, one of the most electric young scorers, arriving like the future had already been decided. One after another. No delays. No concerns. No, let me think about it. And that's not how free agency usually works. Players ask questions. They evaluate culture. They talk to other players. They hesitate. But here, they moved fast. Too fast. And that speed sent a message louder than any press release ever could. Because the same Chicago sky that was labeled dysfunctional, undesirable, a dead-end destination, suddenly became a magnet. Overnight. Which means one thing. The problem wasn't the city. It wasn't the organization. It wasn't the system. It was something inside the locker room. Something that changed the second Reese left. And around the league, everyone noticed. Because players talk. Agents talk. Front offices talk. And word travels faster than any highlight clip ever could. What was once whispers turned into clarity. And that clarity didn't help Atlanta. Because while Chicago was stacking talent, Atlanta was waiting, watching, expecting the same energy. But it didn't come. Not at the same level. Not with the same urgency. Not with the same confidence. And that's where the pressure flipped. Because now, for the first time, Angel Reese wasn't the center of attraction. She was the question mark. And reports started surfacing. Quiet at first, then louder. That not every player was eager to step into that environment. Not because of the team, but because of the uncertainty surrounding her role, her style, her presence. Because building a roster isn't just about talent. It's about fit. And fit requires trust. And trust, that's earned inside locker rooms, not on stat sheets. Meanwhile, Chicago kept building. Not just adding players. Fixing problems. Spacing improved. Ball movement improved. Leadership stabilized. The entire identity shifted from chaotic to control. Or is the league quietly moving in a different direction without her? And more importantly, can she flip this narrative before it becomes permanent? Because once labels stick in professional sports, they don't fade easily. They follow you into locker rooms, into contracts, into every opportunity that comes next. So drop your opinion in the comments right now. No safe answers. Pick a side. Is this the beginning of Angel Reese's comeback story? Or the moment everything started slipping away? And don't forget, subscribe, because this story, it's far from over.